September 11, 2025. You're not allowed to have a video about September 11, 2001 on YouTube. So you have to go over to my BitChute channel, Environmentalist Dana Durnford on BitChute. And I posted 3 short videos today. I'll post more over the next couple of days. We're going to start this off tonight because I'm still a little behind. James Lucid had put out an amazing video called Little Nuclear Johnny. It's a great name, eh? And it's basically the quagmire of a pro-nuclear student going to university and the pressure all around him to stay on that path once he starts it, among many other facets that he managed to wiggle into a little short video. I'm going to play that because we talk about this all the time, and I've never seen it in a video before. It's an intermission, so it's not a song, but it's an incredible prelude to what we're going to do tonight. So I hope you watch this, and I'll be right back after.
My name is John, but everyone calls me Little Nuclear Johnny. I'm 21 years old, 3rd year of nuclear engineering, and let me tell you, the word nuclear does magic things at family dinners. My mother beams when she tells her co-workers, Little Nuclear Johnny's going to be a nuclear engineer. My uncle brags to his bowling league, my brother says it at school, and people treat him like he's related to Einstein. It's prestige on autopilot. All I have to do is show up to class, and everyone else thinks I'm saving the world. But here's the truth. It's all bullshit. The curriculum, a shrine to the 1940s point reactor kinetics, the 6 delayed neutron group's diffusion equation scribbled out when Fermi was still smoking cigars in Chicago. We run them on supercomputers now, but the math hasn't changed. Old formulas, new fonts. We pretend it's innovation, but it's a ritual, a Cold War catechism. I'm learning a dead language like Latin for a dying cult. They tell me radiation is safe if you measure it in the right units. They tell me waste will be fine if you write the half-life with enough decimals. They tell me accidents are rare, 1 in a million. But every decade, there's another meltdown. And when the meltdowns come, it isn't nuclear engineers who show up. It's day laborers in paper suits. It's the homeless busting to scrape corium off the floor for $10 an hour. The engineers, they write reports. Nobody knows what to do with the waste. That's page 1 in my private notebook. They say, we'll store it for 100,000 years. But the longest running reactors haven't lasted half a century without cracking. The math doesn't work, it never has. Page 2, Fukushima. Textbook said hydrogen explosions couldn't happen. They happened. Textbook said containment couldn't fail. It failed. And yet the same textbooks are handed to me as if nothing changed. Page 3, Sternglass was right. Low-dose radiation isn't harmless. But if you bring that up, you fail the class. So why am I still here? Because I can't quit. My parents already mortgaged the house for tuition. My little brother looks up to me. If I walked away, everyone would say I chickened out, a dropout, a quitter. They'd never believe me if I said, It's not science, it's fraud dressed as science. I'm trapped in a profession that's only alive because it keeps pretending to be. Nuclear engineers don't solve problems. They delay them. They don't innovate. They regurgitate. And the waste piles higher, growing on the balance sheet of eternity. My name is John. Little Nuclear Johnny. And I already know this degree will never build anything that works.
Yeah, that's such a sad reality, right? Captured in a single video. I gotta work like a freaking dog to tell the story, and James comes here with a little 4-minute video. Have a nice day. In your face. I just love that stuff. It's James Lucid on YouTube. My goodness. And he's posted 4 other videos. Like knocking it out of the ballpark stuff. Was Fukushima nuclear fallout allowed to be covered up because they got away with September 11, 2001? You'll have to go over to my BitChute channel because you're not allowed to question. You're not allowed to question it. Charli Kirk got exterminated publicly, brutally. I'm sure you all seen that video by now. That is terrifying. To politicians, I guess. So, like, there's a lot of... It looks like on BitChute, whoever uploaded the original videos to BitChute done some AI work on them. That's my take on it. BitChute's a pretty controlled... I posted 3 great videos. The best of the best for 9/11 over there today. I got like 30 views or something. All the crap out there got thousands and thousands of views on BitChute. Can't post on YouTube. YouTube's insane. Can't talk about COVID. Not allowed to talk about 911. Any of the so-called globalist takeovers, you're not allowed to have a conversation. No conversation! Ah! Meanwhile, you won't get them, the same people that are doing it to you, they won't go to Japan. Right on those bags that Fukushima was harmless. So Charli Kirk got publicly executed last night. One of the most terrifying statements I've seen out there was his wife and children were there. And that would be just unconscionable. The FBI is pretty sure they know who it is. Or they're going to have them within 24 hours, basically, by the looks of it. They got the weapon, they got DNA, they got lots of DNA, they got fingerprints, arm prints, like the inner arm prints. They got all kinds of... Now, they can take DNA now, and they can actually draw a picture of you with the DNA. It's a little bit expensive, but the FBI kind of has a get out of jail free card for that stuff. So they can spend whatever money they want. And of course, it's... He had 4 million subscribers just on YouTube. And, when I seen all the media, I seen Congress, I seen the Parliament, in EU, I see all these major Hollywood celebrities. The last time I seen that kind of outpouring was Andrew Breitbart, when he died, who was the brains behind Huffington Post and the Drudge Report. And 2 of these are massive stars right in the media world. And then he started up Breitbart, which is his own baby. That was his own baby. And Andrew was a forensic investigative journalist, much like myself, where you go way down the rabbit hole and you document it and you come out and lay out your case, right? But because he had a history of such success, like there's wild success. Like the Drudge Report is the biggest news media on the entire planet, period. And Huffington Post is massive worldwide, right? They've turned into a massive thing. And he's the architect behind those. And so Breitbart was a no-brainer. That was going to be a hit. And Andrew was going to go a different route. He was going to play the forensic investigative journalist. And he wasn't going to hold back. And he died at a very young, I think it was 42 years of age. He was a conservative, per se. But he was also just a realist, right? So he went after the story, and the story was what the story was. And he was good at hunting down the story. He had a lot of contacts at this stage. He had a lot of respect. And there's a lot of, in 2012, there's a lot of people who will tell you they believe that he was assassinated so they can get hold of his newest site, which was going to be another major star worldwide. It still is. It was taken over by the industry itself, the political industry. It's the same thing we're seeing going to happen now to Charli Kirk's site. He started up this company, and he was going places. That site was going places. That site was growing like crazy. And they just yanked everything out from underneath them, but they're going to keep that site going. It's probably going to be the same kind of people that took over Andrew Breitbart's site, is my take on that. And we'll see. Time will tell in the very near future. But when you see anybody put up on a pedestal of the God status, nobody's entitled to a God status, by the way, then you have to be concerned. And when you see all the major media coming out with the same narrative, and Hollywood and parliaments and superstars worldwide, everybody has in that political agenda routine, have two different sides, right? He was a content provider too, right? So he went into the universities and he found his thing, and he caused people to have a conversation, which is like a crime of the century now. It used to be that way in the 50s and 60s. That was a normal thing, so to speak. But after 4 dead in Ohio, where they shot the 4 students, like there was a tampering down. And the political establishment is worried now, and the propaganda machine out there is worried the same thing could happen to them. I don't give a shit about you or Charli Kirk. They're worried the same thing could happen to them. It'll be in people's minds, well, I can take that down too, look. And even if they catch the guy who done it, which looks like they're going to do, I don't think that'll be an incentive to stop somebody in the future from doing it again, right? Because the whole world all of a sudden had this different spectrum. And I mean, kill for your speech is insane, right? You can't. He gave you the mic and let you have your say, and he didn't cut you off, and then he was expecting to be able to do the same thing. And then let everybody and yourselves just decide who won the debate, so to speak, right? He didn't shy away from the debate. He gave people a microphone to have the debate. He gave them a platform to have the debate. And if their narrative was flawed, he pointed it out, and that's too bad, and that's a good thing. That's how we progress, right? Unlike YouTube, where if you try to have a debate about September 11, 2001, or the COVID, then you'd be banned. I mean, thousands of people would be banned for asking the questions, right? You just got to regurgitate whatever their narrative is from the major propaganda apologist machine, or so what you're seeing anyway is his site will get taken over by the political establishment, weaponized. You can count on it. Fukushima is probably the most important story on the planet when it comes to news and health and everything else. And the whales, the birds, the insects, the 8 million species, and your friends, your families, your loved ones are dependent upon not eating food from a nuclear wasteland, not being poisoned and destroying your health, and having to liquidate your assets to try to bring some comfort to your loved ones as they suffer from the effects of this stuff. And this stuff has covered the whole planet. I'm just going to walk you through some headlines about radiation for a little bit from Fukushima to try to articulate something for you. about what's really going on with Japan. Radioactive material from the reactors, this is any reactor on the planet, by the way, is 2 billion times. So the fuel that's in your fuel pools at the nuclear power site, they take the reactor core out, you basically call it fuel. But it's a reactor core, and what it is a whole bunch of fuel rods. It could be 100 fuel rods in an assembly. So an assembly is just as it sounds, right? You put 100 fuel rods in it, and that's all it can carry. And there's thousands and tens of thousands of fuel rods in each pool. And those fuel rods are full of uranium plutonium pellets that are still splitting atoms for millions of years. So those atoms don't have a containment anymore. They're out of the reactor, which is not 100% containment, right? And then they're splitting atoms directly into the environment for the rest of their life. And there's no repository anywhere on the planet. And most of the fuel is kept in pools. And what the pools do is the atoms create so much heat, they boil off about 120,000 liters in each pool each day. So it's an enormous amount of heat to boil off 120,000 liters in 24 hours. And there's 1,000 fuel pools doing that. So each pool is producing just an incalculable number of atoms each day released directly into the environment, which is equal to every grain of sand on every beach on the planet, and equal to all the stars and planets in the solar system combined. Each day is released from each reactor. There's 1,000 reactor fuel pools doing that worldwide every day. And you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it or taste it or pick it up or perceive it. And we're not able to appreciate the surge in illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, like heart problems and liver problems and lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. So there's all these mental diseases too, because you have lack of oxygen, so you act like a mental illness. But you're producing more white blood cells to attack the radiation that's in your body, and the radiations in your body is pulsing energy and destroying chromosomes, cells, and DNA every second. Your body tries to repair all of that each second also. And because your body doesn't have or any species has a autoimmune trigger that can fix it, you attack it, and the species will attack the radiation in their bodies with white blood cells for the rest of their lives. So this has been going on for 80 years. And we're in real trouble because the world is in denial. It doesn't understand the big picture. They're kept on their heels, walking backwards their whole lives. And it's very difficult for them to settle in long enough to digest anything. And the odds of coming across the real information is pretty slim. So a single atom is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. This is an incredible statement. There's nothing else ever in history that has those catastrophic attributes. And what happened after Fukushima, because like the official story is Chernobyl is the world's worst accident. Chernobyl was a small reactor, was a new reactor, and didn't have any fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores. Fukushima were massive reactor cores and massive buildings, and they were 40 years old, and they had decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings. This is just 2 of the 4 buildings. And it's pretty obvious you don't have to be an engineer or an architect to appreciate the buildings are gone, they're destroyed, and that they're no longer 19-story, 190-foot, 65-meter buildings. And the health impact on the species worldwide has been extraordinary. And so I've been at this a long time, and I'm pretty focused on reality, unfortunately. It consumes your life. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a thing. And so the emissions from these now have caused a cascade effect in the food chain, in the food web. And we're seeing now the broken food web showing up as emaciated whales, emaciated seals, emaciated sea lions, emaciated seabirds, etc., etc., etc. And on land mass, we're seeing an extinction event of the species, the most vulnerable on the basis of the food chain, because they fail to reproduce because of so much radiation toxicity in their environment. Because the radiation, as you know, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, so it has some pretty hideous effects. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases in Fukushima. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. It's not just Japan, this is worldwide now. So the number of deaths were up 12.5% compared to the same month of the year before for heart attacks. An extra 12,700 people died in a single month in just one area, right? The numbers of death caused by tumors was up 7.7%, and cardiac disease rose by an extra 14.6%. And now officials, this stuff is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So the officials, so-called officials, this is the Wall Street Journal, sharply raised the radiation levels for residents, the victims, to get some kind of mitigating materials like iodine pills after the meltdown. Not meltdowns, because why would you call it meltdowns? You only had 4 meltdowns. That doesn't deserve that kind of prominence, apparently, which was 75 times higher than the lunatic WHO recommends for children. So this, like, if you raise the limits double or triple, that's still considered cruel. That's cruel. But to raise it 75 times higher is absurd before they can get any kind of mitigating. And iodine is just very shallow mitigation. And the reality of what happened in Fukushima is now every human and every species on the planet is producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells from the man-made poison. This is unprecedented. But yet society barely understands that this is happening. New York Times, we have Fukushima polluting the entire Pacific Ocean. And we're talking about how people should be dressed. New York Times now, currently, what Fukushima? What's Fukushima? But this is not a game. Don't think it is. Don't think it's not important, because it actually is. And don't think that you're not vulnerable or that you're not going to be affected by it, because you already have been and you always will be. Nobody's immune to this. No species is immune to the adverse side effects of this. And you're all going to, including me, have to deal with this. And we can't deal with a state of perpetual lies and denial and misrepresentations and deceit and dishonesty. And we're not getting any research done on this planet. Nobody's out there doing the research. And I sacrifice everything constantly in desperation to try to get some research done, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to build the operation, right? And then sustain it even after. As you all know, if you've been around here regularly. A local official, 5 million atoms a kilogram, no decontamination. We can't eat the food grown here, but we are forced to live here. So this really tells the story of the nuclear industry. They have nothing but contempt. Therefore, they don't have a right to exist, because the emissions perpetually from these machines, these reactor fuel pools and sites, is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And denial is just the best way to destroy the genetics and the health of every species on this planet. And they're well under, after 80 years of emissions, with Fukushima being a massive pulse event, SOS from the local officials, they can't take it anymore. Black dust over 5.5 million atoms a kilogram, 2012. We'll multiply it by 66.6 to get a square meter. These numbers are not numbers anybody's ever conceived before. They're not going to go away. They're not going to turn to fairy dust. They're still going to be exactly the same numbers if you use the same equipment. If you used actually really good equipment, the numbers would be much higher. 10 million atoms. Now, a BQ is a becquerel. That's a pulse of energy from an atom. So you got 10 million atoms to have 10 million becquerels, which is pulses of energy every second, per se, or a minute. Kilogram of cesium, and you just can't have cesium. Cesium brutal. It'll pulse energy 600 feet every second. These are extraordinary, deceptive, because you can't perceive it. Then you put yourself in harm's way. That is, and they're counting on that. They're desperately counting on that. 10 million atoms a kilogram, and multiply that by 66.6 to get a square meter. These are catastrophic. Nobody should be breathing that air in that environment, drinking any water. It's impossible not to have every single building completely catastrophically contaminated. It's impossible. And the industry really, they couldn't care less. And so there's a small, tiny group of us who've been fighting. But you know, you still have to do the research. You still have to go and do the field studies. And you can't just do a ragtag field study. It's not sustainable, right? Plutonium detected in black substance from minima soma. And anybody expects people to go out there and do the studies without the equipment is nobody's friend, I can tell you that much. The academic community will have hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy their equipment, right? I'm basically denied the ability. So I slowly build the whole operation in increments over many years in order to get out there and do a year or two of research. So it's not fair because the species and everybody else on this planet are the losers. Plutonium detected in black substance from minima soma, which is like a fungus. Think of a fungus. That's what the black substance, it aggregates the radiation. Now mushrooms are a fungus too, right? They aggregate, as we know, worldwide. We'll see examples of mushrooms will aggregate extraordinary amounts of radiation. And of course, a lot of people eat mushrooms, and that's a good way to get sick and die eventually from that consumption. So like if you buy a couple of cans of mushrooms from a nuclear wasteland, there's zero possibility it's not going to destroy your health. It's zero possibility. It could take a year, it could take 10 years, it could happen in a couple of days. Depends on where it's from. If it's from the Fukushima nuclear area, you could be in a catastrophic health crisis within a week or two. Many times more radioactive local official samples is too dangerous, must be analyzed by public institutions. In other words, you need special equipment, and the industry is not going to give you an accurate number because it's not in their best interest. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home or immediately take off their clothes and cleanse the nuclear contaminants. Well, Canada, United States got hit with absurd amount more. And there was no warnings. Despite the fact that you did pay for the departments and your governments in Canada, United States, to seek this out when it happened, to warn the population. You paid for the equipment, you paid for the training, you gave them the monetary, the authority to do it, and when it happened after Fukushima, they didn't tell you. They remained silent to protect the industry that employs them. And so this is a brutal, double-edged, triple-edged sword for your health and your children and your friends, your families, your loved ones. Former Japan official unstoppable contamination of the Pacific Ocean is seriously menacing the U.S. West Coast. Now, we've done the research, and we're able to prove, because we've done the research, because we went out there and sacrificed, that the species are gone. So we can quantify it, and I'll show you some of that. And, if we didn't do this research, then we couldn't tell this story, could we? And I hope you think this is an important story. You tell me. So I went out for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean, and the species to your left are exterminated. I went back for the extra 5 years to see if the species to your left recovered, and they didn't recover. And so is that important to know, that those species to your left are now exterminated? Was that important? Did I do the right thing by going out there year after year? And I was under siege. Everybody hates me. I barely have a friend. And I'm not a bad person for trying to do the moral and ethical thing when nobody else will do it. And providing the documentation so that they can't say they didn't know. They can't say they didn't have access to the information. That was the idea, was to take that leverage away from them. So they couldn't say they didn't know because we had went out there and done it and were very public about it. Species to your left are exterminated. Is that important? Should we know that? Because this is all after Fukushima. Before Fukushima, it looked like to the left. After Fukushima, it looks like to the right. Is that worth knowing, that the species to your left never came back after 6 years of research expeditions? Was that worth somebody's time to go find that information and be able to verify it, document it, and provide the documentation with the GPSs? Was that worth my time? And just because I can't continue to do the West Coast, and I'm doing the best I can on the East Coast, does that mitigate it? Because I'm not backed up by a university. And I've told you, the universities have wanted to fund me. I told them to get lost, because then you're dependent upon the universities. But they wanted to control the narrative. They wanted to use their studies. They wanted me to interview their professors. They wanted to use their documentation only. They wanted to have exclusiveness to me. They want to provide me with all the equipment. Why would you do that? You lose all credibility right away. And so I've always, and I suffered for doing that, just to remain independent. And I don't know anybody in my personal life who understands the big picture, who's able to comprehend the big picture, who even gives a fuck about the big picture. It's not in their world, right? They're far removed from the reality of what the reality is that we need to know. And we need to be able to go and document it. If we can't document it, then we can't know. And so we go out and we get similar results where the species are gone. Is that worth somebody doing? Now, if I was an apologist for the industry, I wouldn't show you this stuff. I wouldn't say, hey, the species to your left are gone. What would you rather have, the species to your left or nuclear power? I'm never going to say, if I'm pro-nuclear, I'm never going to say those words, right? What would you rather have, the species to the left or nuclear power? Which destroys the health of every species and every human that comes in contact with it. Are the species to your left worth fighting for? Are the species left on the planet worth fighting for? Should we just let the nuclear industry exterminate everything and never criticize them, never ask questions, never raise our voice, never debate? Because I can do political videos all day, every day. I'm actually pretty good at that stuff. But you're not going to gain nothing from that. In the end of it all, I'm just another political pundit, right? My life basically means I supported an ideology that are both one and the same when it comes to the military-industrial complex. No matter which one wins the political, they have to feed the military-industrial complex, which is nothing but destruction. Nobody fights for the species, and the ones that do fight for the species, in a lot of countries, are killed. So Charli Kirk and me, if I was doing a presentation and someone shot me for doing it publicly, then that would go against what they're trying to cover up, right? With a political pundit, they take over his website and they weaponize that, like Andrew Breitbart's website, for a century or more. Because I give a shit about the species. I was a commercial diver, and I thought of them as my friends. I thought of how privileged I was to hang out in that environment for 6 hours a day on the ocean floor. And I was very careful, and it's very difficult to be careful in an environment where you can't even touch down without hurting a creature. And so you become very one with the creatures. You're very conscious of all the creatures and that everything you're doing could have a significant impact. And the species to your left they're exterminated. The species to your right is what's left. And going back after 5 years, we're currently on the Atlantic Ocean. Trying to do research, and it's everything's broken down. Everything keeps breaking down. We have just a few small donors that are doing the best they can. And I'm doing everything I can. I mean, like actually lost my pension 2 months ago. I don't know how they managed to do it, but to get rid of my pension. I have another pension that I just went through all the paperwork through, and that hopefully, and we don't know 100% for sure, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks that shows up, or I'll disappear like the species. And so the stress that I'm under is real. It's unbelievable pressure. But I'm still compelled to try to do research. And in the last couple of days, I've covered 540 kilometers. Don't ask me how I've done that. And I've never seen a single bird, which is absurd when I'm in a place that's supposed to have 46 million migratory birds. And I probably passed 250 ponds, and I've never seen a single fish jump in a single pond. That is probably one of the strangest things imaginable. So Japan's radioactive fallout, this is the Stanford University radioactive cesium, and it's only based on 468 hours, 19.5 days. And you notice I got Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. I put that there so I can remember to tell you why I make that assertion. Because carbon, gas on and coal emissions is carbon. So pretend this is carbon from gas on and coal plants worldwide. Well, wherever it lands, you got more birds, more insects, more trees, more puppies, more life, more bushes, more flowers, more honey, more this, more that, right? It's carbon is life. Okay, so let's now pretend that let's call it what it really is radioactive fallout. And you can see this plume covers the whole planet in 19.5 days. But remember, this plume doesn't go anywhere. This particular plume model is only based on cesium, which is absurd to suggest there's only cesium. There's 100 for every cesium-137. There's 100 times strontium-90. So think of each of these as a snowflake, and each snowflake is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. If you know anything about energy, you know it never goes away. And so we've been doing this to the planet for 80 years. But when Japan happened, you had 4 reactors with 8 fuel pools, and each fuel pool had decades of reactor cores in it. So you could have been around 36 reactor cores, melted down in 5 days. They covered that up successfully. Does that mean it never happened? When you look at the plutonium-239 dispersal covering the entire planet, you start to appreciate there's other isotopes that you should be considering. And think about Japan. In the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. 865,000 extra cancers. And not everybody got health care. Not everybody is going to be diagnosed. Unstoppable contamination of the Pacific Ocean is seriously menacing the West Coast. Well, it was the whole planet. The radioactive fallout in 19.5 days also covers the whole planet in 20 days. These models are 20 days, or these studies based on actual radioactive fallout. This was a whale a few months ago in Belgium. It's so emaciated, it has 0 body fat and has no blubber. It has a peanut head, and the shoulder blades are sticking up, and you can count his ribs. It's severe emaciation. They are the apex predator, and they can eat up to a feast on 340 plus species they're known to feed on, rather. So they have a lot of options. And it's extraordinary to find one by themselves, by the way. And so when you see an unstoppable contamination in the Pacific, it's not just the Pacific, the whole planet, all the fresh water got irradiated at the one time. Severe contamination, the entire planet. I believe the country will be evacuated if number 4 fuel pool collapsed. which is an incredible statement, and it's a proper statement, it's an appropriate statement. Imagine if your nuclear power plant in your country breaks down, you should evacuate your country, because that is the appropriate thing to do. Of course, they're never going to do it. So but why would you want that technology on your planet? Because the reason you would evacuate is because you'll eventually get sick from being in proximity.
My understanding is on top of what used to
So,
be
I'm not gonna
reactor
play that.
building number 4.
These are just some of the journalists that are pretending they're on top of Reactor 4, which they said if it collapsed, you would have to evacuate Japan. Well, what other technology do you know on your planet where you have to evacuate a country if it breaks down? How can you call that a nuclear power? How can you call that a power plant? It's byproduct of exterminating all the species is electric power. Does that make it a good thing? Well, in order to have electricity, we've got to poison everybody on the planet. Yeah, it's okay, though, because we're the nuclear industry and we make the rules. FDA import alert. So the United States banned agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures. These were the large prefectures. That's half the country. So yes, they should have evacuated the country because they were completely dishonest to ban the food from just, and they didn't ban all the food on top of that, from just 14 prefectures. Radioactive forest is a permanent risk. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags in the farmers' fields and the communities, but the forest they didn't touch. And every time the wind blows, the forest showers the country with radioactive fallout. And it's not just cesium. When you hear the word cesium, which is a terrible isotope, by the way, but it's completely dishonest and disingenuous to invoke any cesium. The biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods is the curium isotopes. Curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And the nuclear industry likes to say, well, it's a heavy isotope, so it doesn't travel very far. Well, all the isotopes are the same size. It doesn't matter what it is. If you can get one in your country or in your food or in your water, or you can get them all there, and you did. We had an event in 2011. It was an event. And the reason they got away with the cover-up, most likely, is because they got away with 911. If you go over to Environmentalist Dana Durnford on BitChute, the links are below my video, and watch my recent 911 videos. There's more coming out tomorrow and next day. So check back over the next few days, you'll find more videos posted. I put short ones up, believe that. I know you're like, no, Danny, you can't say anything unless it's 2 hours. Which is true, sadly, because you're talking about the nuclear industry. Radioactive forest is a permanent risk, must be cut down. Every gust of wind showers cesium particles over a village. The problem is every village is the entire country, and your countries, has the same attribute. And the forest, by the way, Fukushima was such a big event. We've never seen anything like it, the numbers before Fukushima. All the nuclear bombs they set off, it's just the same as a nuclear war. Study finds 12,000 microsieverts average thyroid doses of internal radiation in children. 12,000 times 750 atoms. Each atom in a child pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. Wrecking their chromosomes, their DNA, and their cells. Their bodies under siege, producing white blood cells to try to repair some of it and attack the source every second for the rest of their life. How do you think their lives are going to play out? There was 13,646 out of 38,200 children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters, and their thyroids are only 2 by 3 centimeters. They're producing radioactive hormone, man-made hormones for the rest of life. This is inconceivable. And so if they're willing to do that to their own children and their own communities, what do you think they're willing to do to you? I can tell you it's infinitely worse again. Doomsday-like radiation release if number 4 melts down. And the frightening fact of that story was number 4 melted down right away. Right, there's the original pictures, the first month. That's completely lost everything. Same as reactor 3, which was a plutonium X-oxide reactor. Frank von Hippel, a professor, on March the 16th, day 5, made this astounding assertion about the fuel pool of reactor 4, but all the reactors are exactly identical. They all have the same amount of fuel at the top of the building. And this was one of the very few incidences we got of it. And again, because it's from media, feel free to get a...
And if, in terms...
My apologies. Feel free to get a puke bucket. I don't know why that was turned up. Let me fix both of those.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods...
So this was March the 16th. She's going to ask him, how many fuel rods are at the top of reactor 4, I think is the ultimate, the way this story goes.
Would likely be inside that reactor. What sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out, because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged.
Okay.
And therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
Because it was so hot, it boils off more rapidly, but only by about an hour or two than the other reactors. All the reactors are full of hot fuel. They're putting fuel there every 14 months or so. They don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. It goes into fuel pools at the top of the buildings, and the tops were all gone. And that's where the reactor cores were too. An ambassador writes to the UN Secretary General, "It's no exaggeration to say the fate of Japan and the entire planet depends on number 4 reactors." So if that happens, the whole planet is going to be poisoned. So they don't want you looking at reactor 3, which happened before reactor 4. They want you looking at reactor 4. And reactor 4 was the one that they faked. Plutonium-241 from Fukushima was nearly 70,000 times more. The actual numbers, when we done the math with the numbers that they have, was 2% or 2.1% plutonium in the fuel pools per reactor core, which works out to around 50,000 pounds, which is absurdly more than 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout in Japan. See, they're talking about Nagasaki, Hiroshima. And they like to compartmentalize things and then try to control that narrative. And they did, right? But if you come here, you get the reality of it. Those bombs only had a couple of kilograms of plutonium. These reactors are around 6 million pounds. So it's 50,000 pounds. I believe it was for 4 buildings, the numbers. I'm going to have to do the numbers again. Put it in a folder this time. 70% of the children tested contaminated with cesium, and the rest were contaminated with uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium. Because they're only looking for gamma, signature, a cesium signature. They're not looking for, and the biggest byproduct is the curium isotope. The cesium is brutal. It's a brutal isotope, and it's very prolific. But to keep putting that one on a pedestal when the most dangerous ones are not, is just the most dishonest thing conceivable. It's truly the most dishonest thing conceivable. Cesium detected in urines of Fukushima infants, and they claim it definitely wouldn't have no effect on the human body. So why is it illegal? Why did they have terrorist laws against it? It's absurd to suggest that cesium is always described as very toxic, and even a single atom of any isotope is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So just because, this is what they do for a living. The professors, when something happens, they'll come out and lie. That's their job. They get the tenor because they're willing to come out and lie. Homes are significantly contaminated in Tokyo suburbs. First time children at the capital had radiation detected in their urine. This is the first time they checked, is more like it. 88% of cesium in radioactive ash might be at risk of being transported from Japan's landfill by the wind and rain. So why are you worried about the cesium being transferred if it's not going to have any effect on the children who's found in their urine? So, first off, we know the toxicity is absurd. Cesium. Pulses energy 600 feet every second, so how can that be harmless? How does that actually work? Well, being a lawyer is very lucrative in the nuclear industry. Now, there's only 10% of the cesium, and you can't just have cesium in the ash. It's going to be curium, uranium, plutonium, and everything else. And so having 88%, you got 88% of the radiation was liberated back into the environment. Maybe 12% of the radiation is in the ashes, and it certainly ain't going to be just gamma like cesium. There certainly will be a lot of it. It's a very prolific isotope, which is not good for Earth. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste. None of this makes sense. 100,000 atoms per kilogram to be incinerated with 1 billion pounds of radioactive, they estimate, to be burnt. These are dirty bombs by the kilogram. So why would you do that? My goodness, why would you do something like that? Same reason that they cut, they're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in the nuclear wasteland. What do you think? They're not wearing protective gear, which means it's for sale. So what do you think is really going on here? They're trying to poison you. And they're going to be very successful at it. There's no dissenting voices allowed. Indoors is absurdly contaminated. So instead of evacuating people from the nuclear wastelands, they just kept raising the limits and telling them it's safe. They just don't care. They're incapable of caring because they've been getting away for 80 years, and the current generation has nothing but contempt for us and the species. The industry is completely out of control now. And now they have compromised the future of humanity and the species. We're actually in an extinction event because of, and I showed you documentation from the research expeditions. Tokyo drinking water unsafe for infants. Now, I know, I'm prejudiced when I went on field studies the last couple of days that I wasn't going to find nothing, but that didn't stop me from going. That didn't stop me from scanning constantly and looking and observing everything. And I'm limited, I'm very limited to what I can do, unfortunately. And I've been desperately trying to put together an operation, and everything seems to try to stop me. It's trying to stop me from being able to accomplish it. And yet, I'm so stupid, I don't know how to give up. I just don't know how to quit. Because I'm an idiot, clearly. And I'm determined on top of that. But that doesn't mean I'll succeed, but it won't be from lack of trying the best I can. And I'm limited to how much I can try, right? I'm busted up from 2 days already, and I just want to go out and do the work. That's a crime right now in my world. Tokyo drinking water is unsafe for infants. So if it's unsafe, then you need to evacuate Tokyo, 36 million people. You can't pretend it's going to get better. You can't pretend it's going to go away. It can't, and it didn't, and it won't, and it couldn't, and it hasn't. It isn't. Because it's forever. It's electrically charged. It binds with everything. And, a lot of the emitters, releases from the site, from the atomization of the fuel rods themselves, and the fuel pools, this stuff is fuel particulates, so it's splitting atoms. So you got hundreds of trillions of particles everywhere across that country and everywhere else that are splitting atoms. It's the absurdness of madness. It's madness times infinity, the harmful effects of that scenario. Imagine alien race coming here and chemtrailing the skies and it's releasing this radioactive material. When it lands, it splits atoms all day long, and it slowly takes over and poisons everything in increments over a few decades. That's Fukushima. It's 100% what Fukushima is doing and done and continues to do and will do for millions of years. And then, because they didn't want, people were waking up, and so they were, we'll pick up all these 1-ton bags. Oh, it's like a banana. Oh, it's like a potato chip. Oh, it's like walking in sunshine. Oh, it's like climbing a mountain. From 1,000 different public relation firms and TV stations and major medias and pundits and side shows. Radioactive dust reported in Tokyo. You can't drink the water there. The country is completely contaminated. And the fog itself, it never disappears, the radiation. 4,000 atoms per kilogram. These are absurd numbers liberated. And only including cesium is the strangest thing. So you're not dealing with institutions and universities that are trying to do something. All they're trying to do is cover up what's happening. And they're refusing to acknowledge what's there. And they just want you to shut up. And they want you to get sick and die. And they're buying shares in the pharmaceutical and the hospitals. Public concerns over Japan's fish import looks to be justified in South Korea. Seafood on sale recently in South Korea, 6 million pounds found since 2011 and 2013. And since 3/11. 6 million pounds found. How much got through? 60 million? They're producing 1 billion pounds of radioactive food in just Fukushima Prefecture alone each year of rice. And they're claiming they're looking for cesium. They admit they're not looking for plutonium. They're not looking for curium. They're not looking for americium or neptunium or 1,000 other fission products that are absolutely there. And so the species, the insects and everything else, the biota is exterminated. We're seeing that worldwide. And now I've done an incredible amount of videos articulating that. You got 2020. You had hundreds of thousands. It was actually millions. We've covered it for around 6 days straight as the story played out. It was 192 species of migratory birds. 192 different species, and these were insect eaters. They showed up in different stages of emaciation. They had starved to death, extremely emaciated. The birds seemed to be in relatively good condition, except they're extremely emaciated. So they didn't have diseases, or they didn't have parasites, or they showed up emaciated. The food chain is broken. They have no fat reserves and barely any muscle mass, so they went until they dropped. And just because the average person doesn't notice, the average person doesn't see this, the average person can't even appreciate this, that doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it harmless or innocuous or benign. It makes it scary, because it's not something that people can identify with, right? So anybody who lived in that area, they were told all kinds of lies. Now, at this point in 2020, avian influenza was never mentioned. And they didn't retrospectively go back and look at the samples and try to blame it on it, which tells you it was. And they acknowledged it was starvation. Now, we've seen that for many years post-Fukushima, these mass die-off extinction events of starvation. And we've been covering it. So just because it may be your first or second time and listening to this kind of topic, well, the story we tell here, the evidence we provide here is different than anywhere else you're going to go. You're not going to see these two pictures anywhere else on the planet. This is only 2 of the 4 reactors that are gone. But I always feel, and unfortunately I'll never know if that's true or not, that when a person's for the first time seeing these 2 buildings and they know a little bit about nuclear, then they know this is different. This is worse than Chernobyl. All of a sudden they can say, okay, well, no, this is actually, I don't need to know much. I know, looking at these 2 reactors that don't exist anymore, that definitely got to be worse than Chernobyl. But the official story is Chernobyl is way, way worse than Fukushima, which is very difficult to convince people of that have bought into that kind of propaganda. So, which was, South Korea sent back 6 million pounds of seafood. Who knows how much got through? But a South Korea professor, Department of Nuclear Quantum Engineering, in 2023, in August, had came out, this was young Jong-il, and said that the 1,000 tanks was equal to 2.2 grams of tritium. It was just tritiated water. So nothing got out of the buildings, in other words. Do you believe his assertion nothing got out of the buildings? I bet you don't. And do you believe that what got out is only equal to 3 grams of sugar being thrown into the ocean? The effects is equal to 3 grams of sugar. Do you believe the effects of that is equal to 3 grams of sugar? Do you think that's what all the whoop is about? Do you think that's why they closed 54 reactors and all the reactors in the entire country? Do you think there's 1,000 or 100 reactors canceled worldwide after Fukushima because it's like 3 grams of sugar? Or walking in the sunshine, or sleeping next to somebody. So the fabled water filtration system, there was many, many different systems. The Kurian, the Siri system, the ELP system, the Uriva system. In 2013, in February, these pictures were released. They were starting construction 2 years later, just about 2 years later, on the so-called ELP water filtration system. In 2014, in the third quarter, the end of the third quarter in August, they were hoping by 2015 they would have the ELPS system up and running. First off, you can't filter, like we counted tanks, there's only 750, but you can fill all those tanks, if there was 1,000, and they were all large, which they're not, you can fill them all 6 times a day with a typical reactor. We're talking over 3 years later, the water filtration, so if you take, the water is fuel particulates. They're pouring water over the nuclear meltdown remains, and they're sucking it up from wells around the site. It's total hit and miss. They have no control over the buildings and the basements or the site whatsoever. They got holes drilled around the site, and they're sucking that water up and putting it in tanks. They had made the claim they were filtering it when it was happening, and then half of the water was sprayed back on the reactors in order to account for, try to keep the numbers down. The total numbers that they're acknowledging was equal to taking a 3/4 inch garden hose, splitting it 4 ways, and spraying one of them on each of the 4 massive nuclear meltdowns. So imagine taking a garden hose, splitting it into like the size of a pencil. So you have 4 pencils of water that are spraying on 9,000 degree Fahrenheit nuclear meltdowns. It doesn't add up, right? And the nuclear industry, when you look at its legacy in the United States and Canada, everything you're looking at there is nuclear sites, nuclear dumps, nuclear holding sites, and nuclear fuel processing or nuclear fuel production sites are all on the Great Lakes, the 3rd biggest aquifer on the entire planet. So every academic who's seen Reactor 3, this is Reactor 3 explosion. When you watch the videos, you can actually see the reactor core and the fuel pool getting ejected out of the building. Ejected right out of the building. These were plutonium mixed oxide reactors. And I mean, everybody's seen this video. Every academic on the planet has seen this within 5 days, 6 days. And so they knew it was gone. There's no doubts to anybody in the nuclear industry, but yet they never told you. They didn't try to tell you. They didn't care about you. There was some dissenting voices originally, but they really didn't take it as far as they could have and they should have. And if they had their chance again, they probably would have. This is day 4. You have 4 reactors in a row with a total of 36 reactor cores and the fuel pools counted per building, or for all 4 buildings, a total of 36 reactor cores, or maybe more, because you don't have a repository. They were storing it in the fuel pools at the top of the buildings that don't exist. There wasn't an academic on the planet in the nuclear industry didn't know it was all gone. and even today refuses to stand up for humanity. The building to your left doesn't exist, so why is the media pretending they're on top of it, or even in Japan? Why would you do that? Because why would CBS, a massive media in North America, the biggest media in North America, and BBC is the biggest media in Europe, and ABC Australia is the biggest in Australia, period, on that continent. And CNN, which is everywhere, it's just a fraction of the media saying they're on top of a building that doesn't even exist. Why would you get the producers, the editors, the videographers, everybody else involved in producing these videos to pretend that they're on top of a building? And why would they participate in it? And there's never been a whistleblower from any of these institutions come out and say, yeah, we faked it. But yet clearly they faked it. You got the entire nuclear industry, and that video I played of James's before, where they get into the nuclear universities, they start realizing, oh shit, this is an insane industry. And there's no way they can get out of it. For a lot of them, they're trapped. Curium plutonium outside the Fukushima plant indicated nuclear explosion at number 3. Well, this was a pressurized explosion. So the reactors are 1,000 pounds per square inch. They need 4,500 tons of water a minute. Each minute. So 1 million gallons of water each minute. And if they don't get 1 million gallons of water a minute, which works out to 6,450,000 1 ton of water a day. So think of it in the context of 6,450,000 1-ton pickup trucks. Every 24 hours has to dump 1,000 liters, 1 ton of water on the reactor. Every minute there has to be 70 a second rather. Dumping 1-ton pickup trucks got to dump their load on a reactor. So it takes an enormous amount of energy. They're dependent on external energy. And the reason they blew up was because they had no external power to run the enormous amount of water over these reactors to keep them cool, and the pressure builds. They're already at 1,000 pounds per square inch. So when they get to 2,000, 3,000 pounds per square inch, then they finally blow. And this wasn't a hydrogen explosion. If it was a hydrogen explosion, you would see the big flame, right? This was a pressure explosion. You did see a bit of a flame because there was hydrogen, but it wasn't a hydrogen explosion. A hydrogen explosion probably would have looked a lot similar to a small nuclear bomb blowing up or a gas plant blowing up or something. This created an incredible plume. And let me find that maybe and play that for you. I think that's it right there. Reactor 3 explosion. I'm going to try to hopefully get the right video. Or Reactor 1. That's Reactor 3, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's Reactor 3. So that's ejecting. Now you see a big chunk starting to fall back down to Earth. Remember, this is fairly slow motion. You see these big chunks falling down pretty fast. They're heavy, see? But look at this plume. There was no flame, right? That's the fuel. It ignites. It atomizes the aerosols instantly in oxygen. That's why they keep it in. And these are particulates. All those particles drifting covers the entire planet, which is incredible. It's the only element on our planet that has that attribute. The only element on our planet that covers the whole planet in a symmetrical plume is anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. And there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Each of them are making a plume like that every 24 hours. These models are only based on venting. It's not even based on the explosions. These explosions were never put into the models. And they denied that they happened. They denied that they lost their inventories. But does that mean it didn't happen? And the consequences of pretending it didn't happen are catastrophic. And it's not acceptable. You shouldn't accept it. And you should strive to have this conversation. You should strive to be better than them. And here's the stump of, I'm going to show you the stump of Reactor 3. Fukushima worst case beyond 250 kilometers could be evacuation zone if the fuel in number 4 melts. Well, like, they don't want to look at reactor 3, which melted before reactor 4. Reactor 3 was right alongside of reactor 4, right? And right alongside of reactor 2 and right alongside of reactor 1, which all melted down in 5 days. And so rather than focusing on, because they put a cover over that and pretend it didn't melt down, does that mean it didn't melt down? And I feel sometimes I have to do these types of shows because otherwise new people won't be able to appreciate the enormity or understand the full equation. And so the first part of that is going to be, once the video starts, then the picture gets better, because that's a video, not a picture, right? So the fuel pools are those two rectangular red depictions at the top, and the half moon one here is the fuel reactor core itself. Now, when you're doing maintenance, and they were on reactor 4, you don't put the whole reactor core in the fuel pool. You put about 1/3 maybe. So the reactor would have been at least 2/3 full. And that's the reason it detonated was because the fuel pool went dry. And then because it's already produced an enormous amount of heat, there's no way to get water back into it. There's no external power. You had a tsunami run through the country. My apologies. It blows my mind that they come out and make the videos knowing the universities won't challenge them, knowing the pundits won't
We are
challenge
here
them.
inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
But see, she's not on top of Reactor 4. That's CNN. They're not on top of Reactor 4. You can't be on top. It's a nuclear meltdown to your left. The building doesn't exist. There is no top to it. This is a short video I put together of a speech by Patrick Clausen with the Washington Institute. And these are the warmongers. They're talking about how do you get to war with Iran. So he starts naming how they got to war with Japan, how they got to other different wars, Vietnam. And he basically, or he flat out says, we attacked ourselves so we can get to war with those countries.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
It would be best if somebody else started the war. This is the mentality. And so they can't get away with this unless the media lets them, unless the universities lets them, unless the government lets them, right? And I mean by that, what I mean by that is they don't point that out to you. Worst case scenario maps showed Japan cut in half by forced evacuation zones, 2012. But that was best case scenario by far, not worst case scenario. You're supposed to evacuate the country because your nuclear power plant broke down. So why would you want that on your planet? What was the point of that? Top Japan official, evacuating Tokyo was a contingency, not worst case scenario. Implementing cost-effective measures was the proper... So this was, they're trying to repair the damage by people coming out and saying we almost evacuated the country, right? Analysts, if truth was admitted about Fukushima, would have broken the backbone of Japan's economy. Well, it should have broken the backbone. You broke the backbone of every species on this planet. Within 20 days, you contaminated all the fresh water and the salt water in the entire planet. All the fresh water, all the salt water on the entire planet. All of it. And like, here's the official pictures of inside and outside of reactor. Both of these are official pictures of Fukushima Reactor 3. So this is the first batch of fuel transported from number 3 reactor. But that's actually what number 3 reactor looks like. It doesn't exist. There is no fuel pools, which were at the top of this 190-foot building that doesn't exist anymore. They've done the exact same thing as I showed you already for reactor 4.
Highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor into a safer location.
So how can she be on top of a building that doesn't exist? Now we're seeing the grey whale die-offs. The starving whales migrate north. Thousands of, this was this year, this was April or March or something. April the 18th. Of 2025, thousands of gray whales now migrating north from Baja, California are in such poor shape. The whales were already in poor shape last fall when they began their 12,000-mile migration to breeding. So they were already emaciated last year. The whales we're seeing, so they're all emaciated. You can't have half the whales emaciated, the other half is not. They all eat the same food at the same time in the same place. They're migrating together, right? The whales we are seeing from the shoreline, from the coastline, they have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae visible even from the shoreline. It's just horrific. That's the death. They'll be gone in about 2 years. Might be a few survive because they went somewhere else and managed to find a little niche, despite the fact that they're pre-programmed for millions of generations to follow a migratory route. And the reason I said it that way was because we have seen them show up in places they've never been before. But it's usually severe emaciation when he shows up. All because a few buildings broke down. And I refuse to give up. I refuse not to try. I refuse to be silenced. I refuse to be the victim. I refuse to not try to do the work, not try to discover the facts. And I'm not going to do it with junk all the time. Right? Sometimes you got to wear a raincoat instead of a tarp, like I've done many times. Sometimes you got to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to last very long, right? So doing the research is impossible because you can't meet the basic criteria without enormous sacrifices and heartaches. And that's the option, the only option we got. It's just brutal. This was a threat to destroy me from the French government, or the Japanese government. Yoshida Mashita, Tokyo Bureau Division and Chicago Division, I believe it was. And so I've done a presentation on a study that we were doing down here for a couple of years. I was doing it for about 3 years. And these birds out there, now we're normally out in the speedboat studying it, but the boat's been broken now for a couple of years. We've done everything I can do. I just don't have the money to keep everything moving forward. And this was not the first video where they called into my show and threatened me. This is the Japanese government. It's an intelligence agency telling me they were going to destroy me. Now, I didn't understand how they were going to do it at the time. I was like, oh, because they were talking about Thunderfoot, and the shoe, which looks like the shoe bomber, unsurprisingly. He's a blogger, a nuclear engineer, but he has the nuclear industry behind him. So they'll come out and try to humiliate you. Now, now when they call into the show here in a minute, they're saying I was wouldn't want to be me. They're going to do me this time. And so this is how brazen they are. They just don't care. They actually call in the show to brag and try to intimidate me, which worked. And how many people have to live with this kind of harassment and still be functional? I don't know many people, tell you the truth. So yes, now see, because this camera, the aperture is stuck open. I can't do pictures, I can only do videos. And if I accidentally click a picture, I have to take the lens off, restart the camera, click a picture, that'll leave it open, turn the camera off, then put the lens back on and only use video, right? So when you're zoomed way in over to that island, because that's one of our study groups for field studies, and it's good enough, like ideally, the theory was I can shoot the video. I think that's Calm Down Charlie. Should we give it a try? Hello?
Hello, Mr. Dana.
Who's this?
Yoshida Machado, Tokyo Bureau. How are you?
Is this the Tokyo Bureau Chicago division?
Indeed, yes. Mr. Dana,
how do you like
we want to tell you about a new...
How do you like my T-shirt I got for you? Do you like my?
We want to tell you
like my
about
T-shirt?
a friend of Tokyo Bureau.
Do you like that?
We tell you about friend of Tokyo Bureau.
You fuck Tokyo Bureau.
He
Fuck you
knows
too,
a
you
lot
piece
about
of shit.
radiation
You shut
and
your
nuclear.
pie hole.
He knows a lot more than you.
Who do?
You stupid man. He a friend of Tokyo Bureau, and he is instrumental in helping us launch Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell that?
Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell
Mr.
it?
Dana.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell that? Long jab.
Huh?
Long
What
jab?
You say?
You say long jab?
Long Jump.
Long jab.
No. Operation Long Jump. Get it right, Mr. Dana.
Long jab?
Long Jump.
Did you order one of my T-shirts I made for you? You probably got the pink. You probably got the pink one, right?
Stop avoiding the situation.
What do you want, scumbag?
With Tokyo Bureau advisor and friend,
Yeah.
Mr. Thunderfoot, you're gonna be finished. You're gonna be finished, Mr. Dana.
Yeah, I'm all shook up, eh? I'm so scared of you.
You should be. Oh, I would love to be in your shoes. Oh, you make me sick.
Hey, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Okay, sit tight, Mr. Dana.
What are you going to be when you grows up?
Sit tight.
So he's telling me that they have launched a operation against me called Operation Long Jump. How many people do you know had a government from a foreign country, intelligence agency, launch an operation against them? They're so brazen, they come on my show and tell me that they're going to use Phil Mason, Stinkfoot, also known as Thunderfoot, to destroy me. And then, I didn't realize the smear campaign that they were actually talking about. So I got to give them credit. They definitely came. They came. They're still destroying me. And so I literally don't have a friend in the world down here that understands it or even gives a shit about the reality or why we even exist. They don't care. And there's nothing I can do about that. You can't. I've never tried to make somebody care about this stuff. But why wouldn't you care about this? How could you not care about this? How can you not understand the effects upon everything and everybody? How can that not move you? How can that not compel you? I'll never understand it. And I'm never going to apologize for trying to do the moral and ethical thing. This is the BBC. The BBC in 2013 are claiming that all the tanks, the 1,000 tanks, and they're going to talk about the 1,000 tanks, are filled up with water they pumped up from under the site itself, which you can imagine how incredibly toxic and radioactive that's going to be. Multiple sieverts per hour, just betas. We have the numbers. And this is 2013. So this is almost 2 years before the ELP system allegedly run. So you can't filter it because the filter becomes so radioactive. It's like taking an oil filter off your car and putting it in for your water filter. When you turn it on, the water is full of oil. You can't drink it. After 20 minutes, you can never change the filter at a nuclear filtration facility. And the water going through it at 2 sieverts per liter is coming out at 10 sieverts per liter because you have tens of thousands of sieverts in a filter. It just can't work. Never worked anywhere else. The science doesn't support it. But because people don't know any better. And so he's going to explain that to you. It's a short video.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So you heard TEPCO. There's TEPCO right here. At the end of 2 years, saying they have no control whatsoever of the water at the site on BBC. No control.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima.
I mean, they're telling you they have no control. You know what that means? Everything they told you is a lie, see? Saying that they had it under control, saying that nothing got out of the buildings, everything was in a tank. You really think everything went into a tank? You really think nothing got out? I mean, my goodness. They're not telling those absurdly exaggerated lies because it's a good story, right? Like, the industry shouldn't exist. It absolutely shouldn't exist on this planet anywhere, because the fuel, when you put it in the pools, is still splitting atoms for millions of years. And so almost every site is surrounded by farms, and it's always prime farmland, very active farmland. And that food is going to poison you wherever you go on the planet and eat it. The story is insane. In Japan itself, in just one study, highly radioactive type of glass rained on Tokyo at 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. Significant consequences for human health. Significant consequences. It's the death of all the species, ultimately, is what's going to happen from this. The radioactive fallout have covered the whole planet. United Nations is not a regulatory agency. They're not an authority. They're not a regulatory agency. They have no sovereignty over any country on top of that. They acknowledge, hang on here. Right, they're very, they acknowledge that they're not a regulatory agency. I don't know how many times. I don't know how many times, my goodness. IAEA expert predicts radioactive season will carry across the Pacific to the west coast of the United States and Canada in 1 or 2 years. It covered the whole planet in 22 days. It doesn't need to travel on the ocean. It covered the entire planet with a blanket of disease machines. This was 23 days. The French government of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. Let me go backwards here. International Atomic Energy Agency's public trust is key to projects in Japan using radioactive soil from a nuclear wasteland. Public's trust. Here's what they said, though, to mitigate their liabilities down the road. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator and is not in a position to judge or approve the soil in the first place. So shut your mouth. Why you got your pie hole open for? You piece of shit. But because they're part of the UN, military-industrial complex, then those policies were taken up by 195 countries with no referendums in those countries and usually no knowledge of the country population. And the people that are going to be directly affected by those policies have no concept that it happened. Like, that is absurd. That is the best way to destroy a planet, and we're 80 years beyond the 8 ball. Well, I've done everything I could today to try to find a way to get a show out there tonight. So we got a show out tonight. You should check out my Environmentalist Day in the Durnford channel on BitChute. The links are below. There's 3 short videos over there for the 24th anniversary of... You're not allowed to have a conversation on YouTube about September 11th, 2001 or COVID. So you have to go over there if you want to watch that stuff. That's insane, right? So why would you do something like that? Because you're taken up by the industry. How come I only got 24 likes on my video or 20 votes in my poll or 20 people on my show? That covers nothing but facts. Typically 5 days a week. For over a decade. I see James put out a video. It looks like a Pokemon kind of influence. He's probably got a link below it to tell us what it is. I'm going to go look at that and try to read that first so we got some concept of what the video is about. If not, we're just going to play it anyway. You see what I mean here? Fukushima Playground. I think, because it kind of reminds me of Pokemon. That doesn't mean I'm right. So I'm going to stop with the video first.
Lucky eggs! Lucky!
Oh, I liked that right away. So this is from the Tribune. This was one of his incentives to make this video. No. Block. Chasey Pokemon Park in Fukushima. We've done pretty good. There's the original pictures. Bring giant support to the disaster-affected community, to the nuclear wastelands. Let's just say it like it is, man. Just say it like it is. Fukushima Prefecture has embraced Chinese. Is known as lucky in Japanese, a symbol of recovery and hope following nuclear meltdowns. So they want people to come in and play Pokemon in a nuclear wasteland so they can say this many visitors have come to Fukushima last year, and next year they'll say, right, you know. But when you trick people, the most vulnerable people, if you're playing Pokemon, you're pretty vulnerable. And you're not watching my videos, I can tell you that much right now. And so you trick these people coming into a nuclear wasteland. It's a nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes. So that's what his motivation was. Let's get after it. We'll see everybody, hopefully Sunday. Take care.